We shall place our mannequins here, Watson.
A wig! This will come in handy.
So, as for one of the murders, we have no witnesses whatsoever. As for the three other, we have at least one person who claims to have seen the victims talking to a man a few minutes before their death. Do you remember whom these would be, Watson? Bravo, Watson. There are our three witnesses. Indeed, Watson, that's the right size for Abraham's mannequin. The account given by Mr. Solomonovich's friend is incorrect in at least one point. The first Joseph said that the man was at least 5 foot 7 inches tall. The second Joseph said he was 3 inches taller than the victim, whom we know was 5 feet tall, which would suggest a height of 5 foot 3 inches. Don't forget that it was this second Joseph who attracted his friend's attention towards the couple on the other side of the road. We can assume he got a very good look at them. Excellent. Now on to the next step. As for young P.C. Smith's account, he must have been mistaken about this person's real height. It is only an inch or two after all, and we can attribute the same height as the other two. Excellent. Now on to the next step. There we are. Magnificent. Bravo, Watson. Our mannequins have been recreated based on the correct accounts. Now, Watson, let's see in what ways these statements differ and how the witnesses could have been mistaken. Let's look at these wigs and moustaches. Let's start by taking the first Joseph's testimony, who saw the man head-on in a well-lit spot and in which he noted fair hair. Now, let's consider the same person, but in the lighting and angle of the other two witnesses, in the darkness of night with poor artificial lighting from above. Put out the light, Watson. Thus, poor lighting and a backlit subject can affect our perception of shades and colours. The wigs from Abraham's mannequin took on the same colour as the other two. The three testimonies, therefore, don't contradict one another, and we can apply the same facial hair to all three mannequins. Turn on the light, Watson.
Yes, I have, Holmes.
Well done, Watson. With regards to the murderer's hair, the three witnesses should agree on Abraham's testimony. As Joseph is the only one who saw our man in full light, his hair must therefore be fair. You see, Watson, it is hard to draw objective conclusions when one is an eyewitness to an event. This leads us to reconsider the various statements regarding the supposed age of the man. Even if you are face to face with someone in full light and for a period of several hours, to what extent can you determine their exact age? And even more so if you observe them for only a few seconds and or from behind. We must allow some flexibility when considering our witnesses' statements, but always scientific flexibility. There we are. Magnificent. Excellent. Now on to the next step. Excellent. Now on to the next step.
Yes, I have, Holmes.
Now that we have fully considered the witness accounts, let's see to what extent they agree. If we apply the range of error for each of our dummies, we can deduce the age of our murderer as precisely as possible. Perfect, Watson. Within a margin of 1 year, Watson, the age of our murderer is 33 years.
But the man described by Smith was dressed respectably, whereas the other two were poorly dressed.
Indeed, but Whitechapel's respectively could quite easily describe the Sunday bests that all lower-class men own. Now, let's place ourselves in the shoes of Liz Stride's killer. He has just slain his victim and sees Louis Diemschutz discover her body. Our killer is at great risk if he stays in the area. He therefore gets away from this spot. But he wants to kill again. However, he might have been spotted in the area before having committed the murder by a constable on his round, perhaps, who managed to get his description. What do you think the killer will do?
Go back home or to a safe location, change his clothes and leave again in search of another victim.
It's the only possible explanation, Watson. The man returned to the safety of his lodgings and then decided to go out again with new clothes and repeat his sinister nocturnal work. That's how the discrepancies between the witnesses with regards to clothing can be explained.
What a cold-blooded animal!
And what determination! Powerful motives are pushing this man. Thus, we can conclude that the respectable man with the package may very well have been seen by the two Josephs.
Even if it is just a mannequin, it's giving me goosebumps. But have we really made any progress, Holmes? I mean, there must be thousands of men in Whitechapel who match this description, wouldn't you say?
You're right, Watson. We have worked on who, now let's work on where. We need a map of Whitechapel, and please also find me a pencil, 2 compasses, one of which can draw ellipses.
I am in need of something.
First of all, let's place our 4 murders on this map, as well as the spot where the graffito appeared and the piece of apron was dropped. Perfect, Watson. Let's connect each crime scene to the one out of the others that is the furthest. You see, Watson, the murders aren't grouped together, but seem to be spread out like cardinal points around a central zone. The killer obviously wanted to avoid returning to the previous scenes of his crimes, assuming that they would be more closely watched, or that he could be recognized.
So, the killer lives at the center of this cross?
In the vicinity, most certainly, but how near? We cannot afford to get it wrong. If you concentrate, Watson, you will notice that the murders are roughly equidistant from the intersection point of the diagonals. Let's focus on the night of the double murder. Remember, Watson, it took us 20 minutes to get from Dutfield's Yard to Mitre Square. Let's draw a line from one to the other. Perfect. We didn't make the trip as the crow flies, but that would not harm our estimate. Let's suppose the killer left Dutfield's Yard at 1 a.m. and arrived in Mitre Square at 1:35 a.m. when he was seen by the two Josephs. If he took 5 minutes to change his clothes, that leaves a range of 10 minutes to determine where this man's lodgings are. We must determine the area in which one can go from Dutfield's Yard to Mitre Square in less than half an hour. To do this, let's draw an ellipsis. The length between Dutfield's Yard and Mitre Square corresponds to 20 minutes. By adding half, we get a distance of 30 minutes. By taking the 2 right segments, each starting from the 2 murder scenes, and which the sum of the lengths makes 30 minutes, we get our ellipses. There we are, Watson. Our killer lives in this area.
It's still rather a vast area, Holmes.
Yes, indeed, and our goal is to reduce this area as much as we can. We must consider the fact that the murder at Mitre Square was committed under a certain amount of pressure, given that the killer knew he was wanted for the acts he committed not long before. We can assume that he had to do it in a safe zone, that is, an area not far from where he lives. This is especially true of an act such as the graffiti he carried out after 2 murders. Let's trace a circle around this point, with the distance separating it from Mitre Square as the radius. This will enable us to determine our killer's safe zone. Our killer must surely live inside this circle. Now, let's intersect it with the ellipsis that we previously determined. There we are, Watson, the Aldgate district.
Shouldn't we inform the police so that they can concentrate their efforts on this area of Whitechapel?
It is probably already crawling with inspectors, Watson, and I doubt that they would take us seriously, even if they were willing to listen to what we had to say. Let's focus instead on understanding the killer's modus operandi. We know our murderer preys on prostitutes who are penniless, weak, sick, or alcoholic, that he distracts them the moment before killing them, and that he left an anonymous message inciting anti-Semitic hatred at the entrance of a building occupied by Jews. How would you describe this man?
What a coward!
Indeed, he is a person of great cowardice. Let's look at his murders, and in particular the depredations on the corpses, putting aside that of Liz Stride, because on that occasion his work was left unfinished. If we recall the observations made on the victims and the parts that were mutilated or damaged on each of the bodies, without forgetting the fact that he also removed 1 or more organs, we can ascertain that our killer evolves during the course of the murders, cowardly and still evolving. And yet, look at the location of our first murder, that of Polly Nichols in Bucks Row. It is the most distant from the area our killer would appear to live. Perhaps this murder was preceded by another within the killer's area. I believe a cowardly killer would commit his first murder in an area close to his home, in order to find refuge as quickly as possible on carrying out the act.
Holmes, an idea just occurred to me that fills me with dread. This evolution of which you speak.
He will pursue his next victim as long as the conditions permit him to continue killing Watson.
But how could one go even further in this horror? Look at what he did to that woman, Catherine Eddowes.
In order to avoid having to answer that question, we must act with haste and planning. Watson, I suggest you inform yourself on the mutilations sustained by the victims. We played with the idea that this could be an act of vengeance against prostitutes. If the mutilations correspond to areas affected by a specific pathology, perhaps the killer wanted to give an eye for an affliction he felt the prostitutes he knew were responsible for.
And this trail leading to Dr. Tumblety Holmes?
I also have a few things to look into in the meantime. I still have a primary witness to track down, not to mention old trails I've yet to pursue. See you soon, Watson. When we first spoke about the Bucks Row murder with Watson, he was reading a newspaper, The Star, dated September 1st, 1888, I believe, which mentioned similar murders in the preceding months. I have no chance of finding the police reports, but perhaps I could find some information at the Central News Agency. I must go there at once. Afterwards, I'll go back to see Abraham, the owner of the pet shop in Whitechapel. The second Joseph's statement would lead me to believe that he may know the man spotted on the corner of Church Passage that night. If that's the case, I must find this witness so I can question him. Ah, Bulling is there. It won't hurt just this once. Hello, Mr. Bulling. So, did your colleague tell you about the tip?
What tip?
Ah, I see. I gave him an explosive tip and he went without you? Oh, that's not very sporting on his part. No doubt he took all of the credit for his discovery.
You're winding me up, eh?
I must show Bulling something to make him believe me.
What do you want?
I'm not winding you up. The proof is that he gave me this advance on the debt.
The traitor! He owes me if I find him!
Before I leave, can you do me a favor?
Heck, tell me.
I'm looking for some reliable info on the murders committed in Whitechapel in the months before Polly Nichols' attack.
Reliable? Ha! You really think you'll find that here? Fine. I'll be honest with you. We have folders that group the dispatches from the current year into categories. In the police law category, you'll find the transcripts from the trials and investigations that we sell to the newspapers that ask us.
Perfect.
Sadly, I am out of time. I'll leave you to solve it, eh? You're the detective, aren't you?
The dossiers are full of papers in dated envelopes. I can't open them. That would be too obvious. How can I tell which compartment to look in? No categories are indicated. These envelopes contain dispatches of police and judicial cases. Now, I need to open them discreetly. I must try to unglue the openings. Water. There, that will provide me with steam. Open, and it looks like I'm in luck. This envelope contains precious information. The information excludes the murder of the first woman, Miss Smith. Jack the Ripper can't be the author of that crime. On the other hand, there are enough similarities to suggest he may be the killer of Martha Tabram. I must go to the pet shop. I must go to the pet shop. Closed until further notice. Abraham isn't there. No luck.
Beep beep.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening, sir.
Do you know why Mr. Solomonovich's shop is closed?
No, I don't. Perhaps his cousin, the cobbler, knows. But I believe the police came to take his animals. I think that might have something to do with it.
When was this?
During the day. The kids you were with the other day were there, they told me. They just came by to ask for some cat's meat. They didn't have any money, but I gave them some anyway.
Is something wrong?
It's just that there was a little girl with them, the same age as mine. My little girl who went away with her mother, with the angels into the sky.
Dr. Watson told me about your loss. Please accept my condolences. Would you like to talk about it? How did it happen?
The illness, sir. My poor little girl was in agony, and her face and body were ravaged by the disease.
Her face?
Yes, she looked like a ghost.
What illness was it?
Dr. Gibbons tried to explain when I took my little girl to see him, but I didn't understand. I'm sure that he was trying to insinuate it was my fault. I'm sorry, but I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I understand. Farewell. Let's go and see Dr. Gibbons. Hello, Doctor. Do you remember me? I'm Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson's friend.
Oh, yes. Excuse the mess, but I am doing a bit of tidying.
I have come to see you about a Mr. Hardyman, a cat food seller by trade, who recently lost his daughter and wife.
Yes, I know him. A tragic story.
Actually, I was hoping you could tell me about the disease that took his daughter, a disease that would have attacked her face.
Well, to keep it short, we are speaking of syphilis, Mr. Holmes. You must certainly know that it is transmitted through intimate connections, and that the vast prostitute population here contributes to its inevitable progression. It destroys individuals by spreading through the body slowly. The most obvious symptoms can be found in the genitalia and on the face in the form of pustules or lesions. Sometimes this illness can destroy whole families. The father catches it from a prostitute, he transmits it to his wife, who in her turn passes it to the kids which she bears or nurses. These cases are numerous in the vicinity. Certain children, and this is the case of the little girl whom I won't name, suffer from an emaciation of the face which will, apart from predicting an imminent death, bring infamy upon the family.
Emaciation of the face?
Yes, what we sometimes call the pox. I will give you a photograph. One cannot be mistaken on the origin of such a face. The eyes seem to be void of lids, the nose is inexistent as if it was cut off, and the cheeks are chiselled as if cut with a knife. This loss of facial matter, this emaciation, is in this area often the gift from a father to his children.
Can I keep this photograph?
I should destroy it, but if it can remind you that one must sometimes think twice before giving in to physical attraction.
I always seem to find myself alone in such cases. Thank you, Doctor. Let's go to the cobbler's. Hello, Mr. Solomonovich.
Ah, Mr. Holmes. How are things with you?
I heard your cousin Abraham had a problem with his shop. What happened?
If I didn't know you well, I would tell you that it's Jewish business that doesn't concern anyone but the Jews. But as you have a little bit to do with it, you have the right to know what is going on.
Ah, would I have something to do with it?
Someone had seen Abraham telling you something and making big gestures near the Imperial Club. A vicious rumor quickly spread, and it has caused him great injustice. A slanderous denunciation attracted the authorities' attention to my cousin's shop. Abraham must be in the process of answering their questions.
I did, indeed, speak with your cousin the other night. I'm shocked at the consequences of this discussion.
As I was saying, it's the story of the Jews. In the face of adversity, we are united, but amongst ourselves, it's like anywhere else. As soon as our people take a dislike to someone, for right or wrong, we can be without pity and quite cruel.
This is all very worrying. Your cousin knows one, or rather two, of the men who were at the Imperial Club on the night of the Mitre Square murder. One of the two, a butcher in Aldgate named Joseph, is probably withholding information of the utmost importance. I must find this man. Perhaps you can help me.
But there are dozens of Jewish butchers around Aldgate, half of which must be called Joseph. And you know, Mr. Holmes, we Jews prefer to remain in the background of this murderer business, this Jack the Ripper thing. All of London is pointing their fingers at us, saying, "It's a Jew who disemboweled these women." Our community is in great peril, you know. There was the business with Lipski and Leather Apron. I will see what I can do, but I don't promise anything.
I'd be extremely grateful to you. Very well. We may meet again, Mr. Solomonovich.
You are most welcome, Mr. Holmes.
I've paced up and down Whitechapel enough. I should return to Baker Street in order to reflect on the new facts that I have discovered.
Hello, Holmes.
Good day, Watson.
Listen, Holmes, I know I should have got here sooner to give you a report on my research, but this case has led me to neglect my patients and my wife more than I care to admit. I've been able to sort things out over the last few days, and now I am ready to pursue this investigation.
You don't have to justify yourself, Watson. Whilst I do tolerate you as an observer, and despite your occasional help with more menial tasks, may I remind you that you are by no means an indispensable part of this case.
Oh, you tolerate me as an observer, do you? Oh, you're too much, Holmes. Well, Mr. Detective, despite my absence, I have been working on this case, putting my relationship on the line in the process. And I happen to have a confidential letter that only passed from one lord's hand to another. What it contains is extremely serious and concerns Dr. Tumblety and his collection of uteri.
Let me see that. Excellent. This American could turn out to be of great use to use.
That's right, and that's not all. I did some research and finally found an illness that affects the genitalia and can, in certain cases, cause facial symptoms resembling the mutilations seen on the last victim. It is called, would you believe?
Syphilis and the emaciation that can be seen in affected children. I have known that for days, Watson.
Really?
Listen, now you're already here, Watson, we may as well continue the investigation. Do you remember the map on which we established the area in which our killer lives? I think we should continue our study.